Uh, as I said, LPs are large family offices, pension funds, significant amount of money that they want to deploy. GPs will take the LPs also have, they put money into various asset classes, right? When they'll go ahead and put it in the stock market, they'll put money into property, they'll put money into say government bonds. Startups are actually the most risky class of assets that large people, large wealthy groups invest in. So typically they keep maybe about 2 to 3% of their wealth for investment into VCs. Okay, if they have 100 rupees, they'll put about 2 to 3 rupees for investment into VCs. That's it. Okay, and the rest of are much safer assets. That's the way they typically work. Okay? All right, let's not go to this. Let's go to something else, which is a little bit deeper, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. Okay? Now, the other thing that you have to remember in terms of the way a VC firm works is that they follow this thing called the 220 rule. Okay? Let's assume that a VC fund manages to raise, say, $10 million or say $100 million, 100 crores from a group of investors. They will set aside about 2% of that per year as management costs to manage costs as far as the fund itself is concerned. They'll have to pay employees, they'll have to pay for rent, they'll have to pay for electricity. So typically they keep about 2% of that per year for an entire period of time, right? And let's assume that means that the fund lifetime is say 5 years, which means of the 100 crores, 2 crores into 5, that is 10 crores has already gone off into managing costs as far as the fund itself is concerned, right? Which means paying off the rent and whatever. And the balance 90 crores is what they have, which they can invest back into startups, generate revenues or generate income and give it back to the investors. That's primarily the thing, right? The 20 rule is something which is called a carry rule, which basically means that look, only if they return in excess of what the investor has asked for, can they take 20% of the additional money. So let's assume that the investor turns around and says, let's walk you through some of those numbers over here. Let's assume that the investor says that, look, at the end of 10 years, I want you to return 3 times my money. So the investors have put in 100 crores, the guy wants 300 crores back. Only if the VC fund manages to generate more than 300 crores, will they be able to, let's assume that they generate something like, say, 400 crores. Okay, out of the 300 crore investment that they have made, 400 crores they have made. So the first thing that they will do is they'll return the 300 back to the investors. And the balance 100 that they have, 20% of that is the carry that the fund keeps, that the GPs keep. And they share it among themselves. Fair enough? Any questions on this? No? Clear? Okay. Now let's go on. Okay? Little bit of the math at this point in time. Let's assume that, let's try and keep it simple at this point in time, right? Let's assume that the fund length, which is the amount of time that the fund is going to run, is say 10 years, okay, which is what I marked over here, the fund length. Okay. And let's assume that the investors turn around and say that typically they ask for higher than regular BPS kind of interest. They'll typically ask for about 12% annual returns. Okay. So which means at the end of 10 years, they have to return back 3.1 times whatever money that they have raised. So which means if they've raised 100 crores in terms of investments from various LPs, they have to give the LPs 310 crores back. Okay, I'm assuming for the time being, and this basically to try and keep it simple, you can play around with this math. Sometimes funds last for 5 years, sometimes they last for 7 years. Various periods are also there, but by and large, the rest of the math remains the same. Okay, this is a 10-year fund. I'm assuming in this particular example case, annual return is 12%. Sometimes investors ask for more than 14%. And that can also happen. And let's assume for the time being the fund size is $100 million. Fair enough? Now let's start making investments. Now you are the VCs, right? In this particular, let me not go into this. Okay. Let's assume that this $100 million, you're going to break it up into 10 investments. 10 companies you want to invest in. You don't want to make investments of $500,000, $250,000 because you're going to be ending up swamped with so many investee companies that you're going to find it difficult to manage them. So normally with a $100 million fund, you'll say, yeah, let me take about 10 companies, 15 companies at the most and work. So right now I'm trying to assume that you're going to work with say 10 companies, but you will make investments into them at various stages, seed stage, then at Series A stage, Series B, where they are scaling and growing, so that you maintain a certain amount of percentage in these particular companies as you scale and grow. Right? Which basically translates to, in this case, it will translate to about 8 million investing into each company. Why the 8 million? Remember that 2% the management fee that we talked about, right? 100 million, 10 years, 2% going off, which means you'll end up with $20 million that's actually been spent on the operations of the fund itself. Okay, so you have 80 million, but you still have the return. How much? 310 million, right? That's the amount. Let's assume for the time being that at exit stage, you hold 25% in each company. Just to keep it simple. Fair enough? Any questions? Any doubts on this? No? Okay. Let's take scenario 1. All companies, okay, all the companies that you put in 8 million in each. Remember that, right? All companies, let's assume they are exiting at $50 million each. Sounds good? Okay. You hold 25% in that. In these companies, right? Which essentially means that for every one of these guys, you get roughly about 12.5. I'll put it $13 million over here. You get $13 million. Okay. Once you've exited all these companies, and it's not that easy to exit all companies simultaneously. Okay. You will end up with $125 million. Is it anywhere close to what the investors are going to ask for? What do you think the investors are going to say if at the end of this, something like this happens? Okay. I'll pause for the time being. We'll go on a little bit more. We'll add insult to injury when it comes to investors. Okay. Let's assume that 5 exit at $50 million valuation, 5 are kind of blockbusters, and they go at $100 million valuation, right? And you still have 25% in every one of these. Okay. You're now hitting, and remember that this is a good fund, in which case they're giving these kind of returns on your personal wealth. It's exceedingly good, but because you're working with somebody else's money, this is not considered good at all. You're going to end up with a return of something like $187 million, which is way below your 310. Okay. Further, and you can do this some more. 5 sell at 50 million, 4 at 100 million, 1 at $500 million. Okay. Valuation at exit. You're now getting there. You're still not there. Which is why invariably, investors always look for what's called the unicorn potential to be able to give this kind of return. Now, I want to take a step back and imagine that you are the startups all over again. Okay. Ask yourself a question. If you are now pitching to an investor, will you be able to project that unicorn status to him at some point in time? To him or her at some point in time? That's the important thing to remember. Okay. Any questions at this stage?
How to identify the unicorn potential of our own startup?
I'll come to that. Which basically means that it's a large market and you hold a dominant position. That's the only way in which you'll be able to say that. Do that. I'll give you simple examples, right? And sometimes it can be as simple as refocus your approach. I don't know if I've mentioned this as an example to some people over here. Maybe I might have mentioned it. There's this company in Bangalore that I was guiding at one point in time. They were working on, shoes which are meant for the visually challenged people. Did I mention this to you? No. Okay. They were working on shoes, insoles that go into shoes that are meant for visually challenged people. Right? The issue is this, which is that they were saying that, look, these people who are visually challenged, who, they walk around with, the canes, they find it difficult. And so they said that, look, why can't we have smart shoes that talk back to the person that says that, hey, you know what, there's a stone here, there's a gutter that's coming, be careful, there's traffic, all this kind of stuff is what they think, right? Sounds innovative, and it also adds a lot of value as far as, a visually challenged person is concerned, because that person is no longer identified by, by a stick or something like that, and he or she is walking around normally, right? Ask yourself, could this become a $1 billion valued company? What do you think? No? Why? Lots of potential people who are visually challenged. Okay, so that's there. But I think you're getting there somewhere. Because the issues to do with poor eyesight or blindness is actually dropping. So it's a shrinking market. Okay, so VCs could realize that. Okay, anything else? Anyone else could think about something like this? How could this become a potentially a billion-dollar valued company? Could this ever become a billion-dollar valued company? Yeah.
Actually, sir, because nowadays we are using lots of mobile phones, attention span is very less. So the tools that are being designed could be used for people who are constantly on the phone and need some guidance and about that.
Getting there. But the thing is that no, it's not. It's smart. Which is that you're looking at your phone. In fact, apparently Bangalore there is a board that says watch out for mobile zombies. People who are walking around with their mobile phone in their hands, right? So the shoe that actually yells at them says that look, no, don't, let me do something. Yeah, that could be that's a good idea. Anything else? Yeah.
Implement the same technology to the driverless cars.
So the way driverless cars, this I'm talking about almost 8 or 9 years ago. Okay, so this is something. But here's an idea which someone gave them, okay, which actually turned this into a potentially $1 billion acquisition. They said that look, the same thing, change the way in which you are describing this business as a product which is meant for visually challenged to a product which is meant for visually challenging environments. Then it could become big. The way these guys positioned it was, they said this is a product which is meant for the army, defense forces. They always work in visually challenging circumstances. Wars are never going to die down. The market is constantly going to increase. So someone from the US came, they actually acquired this company out of Bangalore, moved them lock, stock, barrel, and now they are working somewhere out of Langley or something like that. They are there. So this is the way in which you can typically position. I hope that answered your question in terms of how they can pitch. Any other question? No? Okay. No. We have said that look, potentially you could make it a $360 billion, say $360 million return or something like that. Is it really realistic? Invariably, the stories are like this. When you speak to any investor, 5 companies will give you nothing. Nothing. They fail. You put in an investment of $8-10 million into that, and they just tank. That thing is not going to lead anywhere. Okay. Some 2 or 3 of them might do small returns. The 25 million, 50 million kind of valuation or something like that, or your $8 million investment in that. Maybe one could be large. Maybe. And with that, you'll fit, $380 million kind of a thing. Now, you remember the 220 rule that we are talking about? The 20%, which means what you are returning back to the LPs is first you are giving back $300 million. Okay? Or sorry, $310 million back to the investors. Because that, you remember that the math that we did over there that says 1.12 raised by 10 is 3.10, right? So you have to return $310 million back to the investors first. The $8 million that you have kept over there, of that 80% goes back to the investors again, to the LPs. And only 20% of these 8 million you get, which is about $1.6 million. Okay. Now, a $100 million firm is not a small firm. It's a fairly decently, high-priced kind of a fund which is sitting over there, right? Now, and let's assume that these companies typically have, say, 4 to 5 partners. They're not going to be GPs; will be about 4 to 5 partners. Let's assume that they're trying some kind of decent salary or something like that. But they're all getting into this because of this outsized return that they expect at the end. And at the end of it, when these 5 or 6 partners, when they have to share 20% of 8 million, which is $1.6 million, which is roughly about 10 crores across 5 or 6 of them for 10 years of effort. Don't you start feeling sorry for them now? Especially when they expect a change, kind of thing. That's the way this thing typically happens. Okay. Now, VCs typically think when you're talking about it, and I'll take up examples if there are questions at the end of it. They typically think on, they say that look, when I'm putting money into any company, there are 4 broad risks that they will look at. What is the development risk? What is the market risk? What is the execution risk? And what is the finance risk? Development risk is all about at very early stage when they say that look, when someone comes over and says, look, I am putting together this, what do you call it? spaceship that would fly to Mars, you know, with carrying people or something like that. So the investor is going to start looking at saying that, look, can this actually be built by this team? Does this team have the right kind of capabilities to build this? And that's the first thing that they look at. The second thing that they look at is markets. You said that you are going to build this, this product. There's this very famous story which I'm pretty sure that you'd all have heard of, right? It's that NASA, when they wanted to send people to the moon, they wanted to figure out how is it that you could not the moon, when they wanted to send people to space, right? They said that, look, let's go ahead and figure out how is it that ballpoint pens can work in space under low. I don't know. Some of you are smiling, so I'm pretty sure that you heard this story before, right? So NASA spent $1 million on this, trying to develop a ballpoint pen with that ink cartridge that will work under low gravity, whatever. And they spent million. Okay, so Russians used a pencil. Okay, so that's just good. This is a scam story, but it's a very nice story to relate to at some point in time, right? So the way in which the VC will look at is to say that, look, is there a market for this particular product at all? Who's the person who will buy this? Why will they buy this? What is the value that they'll see this? That's the other thing that the VC will look at. The third thing that they look at is execution risk. What are all the things that could potentially go wrong? Can there be, for example, suddenly, a change in legislation because of this thing is banned? Remember that Uber, Ola, and Taxi for Sure at one point in time almost crashed in India. I don't know if you guys remember this, because there was one single case of molestation that happened in Delhi in an Uber. I don't know, maybe people were much younger at this point in time, but I remember it distinctly because there was this one single case, and suddenly all of these things that were called call taxis at that point in time, the government of India turned around and said ban them. Somehow they came back. Because otherwise, these are companies in which VCs had put in a lot of money, they would have still tanked. If the government had turned that legislation heat on and said that, look, we need to have this kind of legislation in place, right? So they look at all this. They look at things like what are the chances that the team will stick together? Are there issues between the co-founders? Okay. And I've seen enough companies which have had issues between co-founders. A co-founder says one thing, the other co-founder says something else, the two of them have a fight, and before you realize it, the company is gone, right? So investors, before they put in that, all those come under what are called execution risk. And finally, what is the finance risk? We just talked about it, right? Such as, look, I'm putting some money into this, what is the chance that I'll be able to make a significant return on this, right? These are the things that they will look at. Next, they look at 5 things that you need to be very, very aware of as a startup team. They will look at this. That is, look, is the team cohesive, capable of execution? Are they clones of each other, or are they, going to be significantly different from each other? What is the skill that each person brings to the table? What is the kind of experience that they have had prior to this? Have they been there, done that? Those kind of things is something that they look at. This is another phrase, it's called TAM, or total addressable market. Is it really, really large, and is it growing? Right? So, for example, we talked about the visually challenged thing, right? That's a shrinking market. That's because of diet and because of the way in which people have changed their eating habits. The chances of people losing their eyesight at a very young age is declining. Visually challenged people are declining to quite an extent, right? So that the total addressable market, is it huge and is it growing? Is the other thing to look at. Third, that they will always look at is tech. What is the technology that you have, and how can you leverage the technology to scale and grow? Or is it just going to be a case where you're going to throw more and more and more people into this particular thing? Because if you throw people into a solution, then you're just adding more and more and more costs. You're never going to be able to use technology, because technology can be used to scale and grow a company, and that can give you examples of this as we go forward, right? Next is traction. Okay, how quickly are these companies growing? I'll give you an example when it comes to traction, right? So I'll talk about this. For every one of these I can give examples. Okay? And trenches. What are the kind of defensive positions that this company has? Let's assume there is a strong competitor who comes in, saying that I'm going to do exactly the same thing at 1/5 the cost or 1/2 of the cost or something like that. What is the kind of defensive position the company has, by which they can defend that market? Okay. With that, I'm going to stop. Feel free to ask me any questions. More than happy to answer questions. If you don't ask me questions, I'll start asking questions.
what is the mix of strategy for these VCs to get the right kind of mix of startups?
See, the first thing that most VCs will do is they look at which is the industry that they want to really operate in. Okay, and sometimes they operate on these buzzwords, okay, which is actually now it's declining, right? At one point in time, you would have heard saying that, look, blockchain is one of the technologies. Every VC is turning around and saying, look, I want to invest in blockchain. Then suddenly every startup was turning around and adding that word blockchain to their name, right? And saying, or AI, something artificial intelligence or machine learning. Those are some of the buzzwords that they were using, right? So sometimes there are these things that are called hype cycles. Okay, because of hype, the phrase itself becomes so glorified that people turn around and say, look, this is going to become really, really big. Simple example, right? I mean, the number of, when metaverse. All of you, anyone who's not heard of metaverse? Everyone's heard of the word metaverse, right? Which is, an artificial, augmented reality kind of a world in which suddenly they said everyone will live in it and, things will be wonderful in that meta world and that kind of stuff, right? And this is not something which is, it actually led to someone like Facebook, which is, billions and billions and billions of dollars in branding. They're going to change their damn name to Meta. Okay? How is it? What kind of results is it yielding? Have you ever seen any company that's actually working in this meta space? Or forget that. There will be a lot of startups who are working in this meta space. But have you seen companies that are putting up their hand and say, hey, you know what? I want my entire workforce to work in the metaverse. Have you ever come across anything like this? It's not going to happen so quickly. So I came across investors who turned around and said, wait, what do you think of metaverse companies as an example? I said, man, look, you find me one customer who says they want to adopt a metaverse and start working for them. Remember this, during COVID, this was a chance when the metaverse could have really taken off. Right? The word was, because at that point in time, everyone was living a virtual life. You're sitting at home, you're glued to your PC, you're glued to your screen in front of you, and you're operating for them. What stopped you from wearing one of those VR masks and walking around and interacting with people? There were companies that actually tried it. There's a company in Mumbai called Imaginate that actually did this. Look, in a VR universe, I can create avatars of every one of your colleagues, so they look like them, and when you're interacting with them, only the physical part is missing. But you can walk up to them, you can have that one-to-one conversation, while other people are having conversations around themselves, right? So imagine that kind of a scenario. Even that company went nowhere. They were very, very advanced, right? So that's the kind of thing that happens when it comes to the hype piece, when it comes to investors, right? So when it comes to a mix, most of the time, investors will turn around and say, look, let me go and put money into a boring company that can potentially become a unicorn. Okay? Byju's. One of the most boring companies, the most boring space that you can think of. Education. And now they are getting hit first. Why is it that so many people put money into Byju's? What is Byju's selling? Byju's is essentially selling course content. What's so unique about that? There's nothing unique. Right? It's a boring company. They get big, so that's something that they could invest in. Right? Sometimes they'll hedge their bets in terms of potential bright sparks that might come out sometime down the line. But for that, as an investor, you've got to be very careful when you're making these investments. If you're a startup, frankly speaking, in my opinion, it's far better being a boring company that has a very, very potential big market. Like, take for example, Myntra. Myntra sells what? Myntra sells enabled to an extent. This is what website enabled, but nothing else. And maybe some level of smart intelligence that's coming into it, by which a chatbot or something like that could potentially suggest, saying, hey, you know what? You're wearing this colored shirt. Have you tried wearing this colored shirt instead? Right? Those kind of suggestions is something that chatbot can do, even though there are chaos that comes with some of these things also. So they can do that, but it's essentially what? It's a clothing company. Going up. Whereas if you take something like, say, for example, the startups that are actually working in, you take something like, so many startups that I can think of which are working on very, very cutting edge, tech products which are meant for consumers and that kind of thing. So many, I can't remember any, but I think sure something will come to me. Investors will put in some amount of money into them, primarily to check whether they are growing or not. They'll put a small amount of money into them, saying that, look, this is what I call the kerchief strategy, right? I take my handkerchief, put it on the bus seat to make sure that nobody else can occupy that seat. I put my hand in a bus seat. Same way, an investor will take some money, put it into a startup and say that, look, I'm making my investment in this, I'm betting on this. Hopefully, if it becomes big, then I'll follow on investments. Otherwise, it becomes one of the roadkill of the day and I'll drop it. That's the way it is. Hope that answers your question. Yeah.
As you mentioned, like the investors are well aware about 5 out of 10, 5 will be failed ones.
If they are lucky. If they are lucky. It's very good.
So why don't they learn from the mistakes and try to invest small amounts, even though they are big firms, and try to understand for the period of 3 months or 6 months in the journey with the startup entrepreneurs, and then give that big amounts.
Okay, so I don't have that one single slide with me. I should have got that. Right? It's just 3 months to 6 months in a startup's lifetime is nothing.
It's about the journey that they can see what is happening. Nothing
Very
practical.
difficult. Very, very difficult to see how much progress the startup is making in 3 to 6 months. Very difficult, right? Unless that guy is on a super high growth path. In which case, then it's not just you as the investor who's seeing it, everybody else is also seeing that, right?
Exactly.
In which case, then everybody will jump on that. I'll give you an example of one of those companies right now, right? But I've seen situations where I've seen, for example, like I said, I worked at Big Basket. It was in their first year they raised a very small amount. Why? Because the founders were ex a company called Fab Mall. They had set up this company called Fab Mall earlier, which had been acquired by Trinetra grocery stores. And then they came out and set up this company called Big Basket maybe about 10 years later. Okay, because the founders had that kind of experience, initial investors said, yeah, let me put in some money because these people have that experience. So they put in that. But by the time they raised their second round, it was 5 years later. And then after that, they were rapid releases of investment. It takes a very long time before you can raise, before you can, give that kind of, as an investor, before you can get that kind of visibility into how well a startup is doing. Because not only are you keeping your eye on that investee company that you work with, you're also keeping your eye on all the others that are there in the space. Right? You're keeping an eye on Big Basket, you're keeping an eye on Smart, you're keeping an eye on Spark, you're keeping an eye on Star Bazaar. These are all big brands. Star Bazaar is Tata Group, Reliance, Jio, all of those you're keeping your eyes on because Big Basket is going to be competing against these people at some point in time. Right? So you're trying to keep your eyes upon all of them. That's why this thing happens. And remember that the gun is always in the PC's head. I says, look, I've given you 100 crores, I want 310 crores now. That's the thing that they. Because remember one thing, which is if they do not manage to return this, to the investors, to the LPs, their career as investors is gone. No easier way than shooting yourself in the foot with this kind of a mistake. You fail to return money back to your investors, your name is money. You can't even get into a startup as a board member or something like that because you're tainted. That's the kind of risks that investors have.
Two points. First of all, about the TAM. You mentioned about the TAM. But generally, they will see at how you are executing that song, right?
Correct.
Maybe a little bit you can elaborate, because TAM is easy, I think, to find, but for the execution in this
that's a traction part.
Okay.
That's a traction part that I'm talking about. I'll give you an example in terms of one company that I actually came across that executed upon this. So this is a company called Docufy, DOQFY. Okay. Docufy is essentially, it's again one of those boring companies, right? How many of you have ever had a case where you had to get a legal document, stamp paper done? Can you just raise your hand? Almost everyone has had to get a legal document done, right? I mean, basically a rental agreement or something like that. You've got stamp paper done, right? And can you understand the amount of pain that sometimes you have to go through in terms of standing in front of a registrar and getting the thing stamped and whatever? Document, I said that, man, look, I'll take this away from you. You don't need to do this. What you do is, you pay me, I will get it done for you and I will deliver it to you. As simple as that. So the only thing that they had to do was they had to buy these stamp papers from specific dealers, keep them, and then if someone comes over and says, hey, you know what, I want a rental agreement done, have a document says that, yeah, I have a template. You take a look at this template, fill in the details, give it to me, I'll get it done. I have an army of notaries sitting with me who will stamp it, see it, and give it back to you. So that's the way that they were doing it, right? So they did that very, very well. So initially they started off with as a 2-person team. One is, a tech guy, the other is a legal guy, company secretary kind of a guy. And the two of them started pushing off and they said that, look, how do we figure out whether there is a market for something like this? So they came to me and asked me, saying, what is it that we should do? So I said that, look, again, this is Bangalore, right? So I said that, look, in Bangalore, there's one of these big buildings over there called public utility building. Okay, they're filled with lots and lots and lots of little offices. Small offices over there. He said, look, start from the top floor of the public utility building, go and speak to every office person over there and ask them if they want this kind of services or not. It's just an easy way to test out the market. By the time they came down, okay, across the 30 odd floors, they had something like about 120 offices or something like that. Only 4 people said we do not want. And even those 4 people said, boss, by the way, my friend over there needs. So that's the traction. The minute they realized that, they said that, okay, the other thing that happened was there is a bank in that same public utility building. So they went and met the bank manager, saying that, do you want this? That guy jumped out of his seat. He turned around and said, do you know how many loan applications we process on a daily basis? I cannot afford to have one of my people go across to that notary. There's a high court right next to, not high court. There is a court building which is very, very close to public utility building, where notaries typically hang out. He says, I cannot afford to do this. If you're doing this for me at a markup, I'm more than happy to give the entire loan business across, which means hundreds of documents on a daily basis across all branches. That's the traction that we are talking about. So keep that in mind. I do not go so much by serviceable market and whatever, because then people tend to say that, look, I am operating in this geography of Visakhapatnam, so how many people in Visakhapatnam need? I don't look at it from that perspective at all, because it doesn't make sense. At one point in time, I remember startups in Mumbai used to consider that Mumbai was the only market. Startups in Pune still think that Pune is the only market for whatever they do. And I don't see any reason why we should even limit ourselves for thinking like this. Any other questions?
So don't you think that first it's better we capture the local market than run after bigger markets?
That's an execution strategy that's based upon your strengths. Clearly, yeah. I mean, you're concentrated in one particular place, but if you turn around and say that, look, this is not the market for what I'm creating, but an adjoining town or an adjoining state might have a market for something like this, be prepared to move over there and capture that market.
But not as the first step, right?
Maybe as the first step itself. Right? Let's assume that I'm just taking a simple example of say, let's assume that you're a food company that's making dosa batter. Okay. ID, for example, started off trying to sell it in Kerala first. Okay. And they realized one thing, which is that Kerala, the product was not selling so much because mostly people are grinding it at their own home. And this PC Mustafa, who's the founder of ID, he realized that he's a Malayali himself. So he said that, look, people are doing this. Where did he switch to immediately? He said that Bangalore, most of the people over there are professionals. They don't have the time to go ahead and grind. So let me switch over there and do this. He didn't waste his time trying to grab the market in Kerala first.
But he tested it there, right?
He tested it to learn, saying that, look, will this work? People didn't buy. I mean, he didn't see the responses at all. He jumped and then he got into Bangalore, and then from there, then he took off in various other places. Here's another example of something which I can think of, right? Taxi for Short, which is a company which I've guided. They started off very similar to Uber. In fact, they started off earlier than Uber globally. And they started off earlier than Ola. Okay, when they started off, in the beginning, they had a very, very weird idea that said that, look, we will buy 5 taxis and take it to drop people from their homes to the airport. Why? Because the only competition in Bangalore at that point in time was this cab company called Meru. And Meru apparently was such a disaster that you book a Meru cab, the guy will confirm, saying, I will come. Last minute they will ditch you. So these guys, Pramya and Prabhu, the founders, they had gone through this trouble before, and they said that, look, it's not just us, other people will be going through the same issue. So they initially thought by saying that, look, we will buy 5 taxis because that's the amount of money that we have saved. and we'll operate that. So when we met up with them, I said that look, there are so many of these cab companies that have excess capacity. See how we can work with them. So then they started speaking to these cab companies, and every cab guy said that look, if you can get me rides, I'm more than happy. Even then, when they tried it, they were initially doing something like 3 to 4 rides a day. They said that look, this is not taking off. One day, suddenly they realized one thing. They said that look, let's go back and take a look at the data that we have at the end of 4, 5, 6 months. Let's look at that, right? And there was a few people who were taking taxi for sure cabs on a regular basis. So he wanted to check and see who are these people who are taking this on a regular basis. Is there a pattern that's coming up over there? They realized one thing, which is that the people who were taking it on a regular basis were pregnant mothers. That's when they woke up and said, boy, okay, I mean, Raghu was the guy who had this idea. He said, look, this is wonderful because now we can start focusing upon people who want this no hassle kind of a ride from home to the hospital and back. Right? And they focus on that. Within 3 months or something like that, the numbers are shot up from 3 to about 30 to 40 per day. That's the way these things sometimes go. So those are some of the things that you have to keep in mind. No questions from the MEC students at the back.
So if VC's life is so difficult, what about
Angels are even okay. So angels might be slightly better.
Yeah,
I'll tell you
they
why.
own money.
Because angels typically they have a lot of money that they have set aside, saying that look, I can blow this up on a holiday,
Yes.
or I can blow this up on an investment. What they are doing is they are investing in what I call dinner time stories. So they'll say, look, I put in some amount of money into a company that is doing some social work. Why for dinner table conversation? And they leverage that. Angels typically are in a completely different class altogether because angels typically work with their own money.
Yes.
VCs work with other people's money. VCs work with OPM, other people's money.
Yeah.
It's a OPM.
Yeah, okay. But the angel network,
Angel networks, once again, people become parts of angel networks.
What is their own
The
money?
angel network has a problem. But the angels themselves, they don't have a problem. The angels turn around and say that, what, I'll put so much X amount of my money in this particular startup or so much Y amount of my money in that particular startup. That's the problem. They don't have that problem as much as the GPs and VC funds are concerned. But the managers of an angel network,
They have that.
they go through the same kind of issue that investors, that GPs.
As angels have came into the picture, can we talk about Tide 2.2, the grant wala?
That's a pure grant. That's a pure grant. It's got nothing to do with investments that's coming into this, right? Typically, what happens at the government level, the government is actually set up close to. The government is operating on this for multiple reasons. One is, I personally think that India has always been a hotbed when it comes to entrepreneurship. Okay, it's only around the British time that we kind of got into this mentality of company bahadur job or government job, those kind of things. Something that
Government servants.
government service. Okay, so that actually became a phrase, right? We are looking for a husband for our daughter who is in the government service kind of a thing. And that was considered as reliable those days. Right? So that's the kind of thing. But I think we are trying to bring back that level of entrepreneurial energy that this country has. That's what. Okay. Now to be able to break that mindset, there's got to be something that's available upfront. So the government is not willing to put in money in various forms. Right? They're willing to give loans to MSMEs. Okay. I won't comment upon how effective these strategies are or how well these tactics work, or how effective their strategies in terms of putting grant money into various companies, startups is working. Yes, it encourages people to try. But from a perspective, to us individually, we think it's a huge amount of money. But from a government perspective, it's a bitter. They just say, this is a small drop by which, if you can excite the marketplace to behave in a particular way, that's what they do. That's why most of these Tide, say METI grants, or say even Startup India Seed Fund Scheme, these government grants are there. They really don't, in most cases, so the Startup India Seed Fund Scheme, they give incubation companies, they give incubators up to 5 crores, right? And they say you make these investments. All that you need to do is you need to tell me that you haven't done swaha of that money. Okay, right? You've invested this money in this particular company and you've taken some amount of equity back. It doesn't matter even if you generate a zero return on that. Let's assume all the 10 companies, let's assume that you're putting 50 lakhs into every one of these 10 companies, every one of these companies goes dead. If you make money, the money is yours. You don't need to give the money back to the startup India seed fund. That's the way with this work.
Thank you.
So
Sure.
now the VCs, when they usually, they will have like an executives, they come with a presentation and then they'll say, okay, we'll get back. But sometimes they don't get back, and when you try to approach them, they will not have a clear answer. Okay, so it is very difficult to find out what they are thinking, so that we prepare accordingly. And of course, we have our milestones and all. But how do we know, like, and we don't, because sometimes we'll ask them like, okay, tell us about your other investments in this particular domain. They will say like, okay, we have done this. But that one person is only one, but it's a huge team, right? How do we know what they're thinking? Like we want to get more feedback.
That's the reason why I did this.
Yeah, but still,
Okay, well.
more. I'm asking for more practical. This I understood.
You ask yourself these questions that says, look, did I manage to convince a guy that I'm not a risky proposition? That's step number one. Two, you ask yourself that, or obviously you're not going and presenting alone. You have a group of people who are sitting there with you. This is a tactic that I typically suggest. Whenever you make a presentation, never go alone. And do not make the college mistake of saying that every person on the team is going to make presentation over there. Now the next part of the presentation will be taken up by so and so, or the third part of the presentation will be. Don't do that. One person makes the presentation, the other people just observe. That works out to be much more valuable for you. So then you can get that feedback back from people who say, man, look, at this point in time, I saw that the VC, kind of yawned and he went off to sleep. You might not have noticed it. Okay. Now the other thing to remember is this: no VC firm ever allows a single GP, general partner, to take an investment decision. It's always the committee. All the partners put together will decide. So a single GP might meet you, speak to you, get all the details as far as you are concerned. Okay. But then it is his job or her job to go and present you all the rest of the partners. And then as partners, they all decide saying that, look, we are all in the same boat. We all have to return this 310 crores back to the investors who have given us the money. Now what is it that we need to do with this particular company? Sometimes as an individual, the GP might turn around and say that, what, I like this guy, so I don't want to say no to him. So, and this is a very cultural thing, right? In India, we never turn around and say, no, I don't have the time, or no, this is not going to work. Those kind of things we know. Lage raho, dete raho, kuch na kuch to ho jayega baad. That's the kind of stuff that we typically do. Unfortunately, sometimes these things happen with VCs also. Yeah.
Do you have any VC particularly focusing on tech startups?
There are lots. There are lots.
Any of them you can suggest to our meeting?
Wilgrow is there. Wilgrow does a lot of work in the edtech space. There are CVC funds that are actually working in this particular space. We'll connect them. I'll speak to the kind of funds that are working in edtech space.
How can we protect a startup idea when there are lots of VCs pitching people?
Sorry?
How can we protect or safeguard our startup idea or startup concept so that VCs don't manipulate or share it with somebody
There are
else?
very, very few VCs who will do this. Okay? And this is a
Is it
misnomer.
right or how does it work?
It's very rare. You don't need to. See, sometimes we end up saying that, look, let me go to a VC and say, look, sign an NDA or whatever. It never works. Right? Because the guys couldn't turn around and say, my stock, my is my brand value. If I go and open my mouth about you to another startup in which I have already invested and say, do this, it's going to hurt me in the long run. And it's happened. Right? More often than not, VCs will tell you upfront, saying that, hey, look, let me tell you this, which is that you're talking about this particular thing, I already have an investment in this particular company. So if there's anything which is competitive, don't tell me. So they'll tell you all this upfront. And it's also up to us to do a certain amount of diligence, right? I mean, the VC is going to do diligence on you, you might as well do diligence back on that guy. On his website, he'll have all the details that says who are the investing companies that he has. You might not talk about which are the ones that he is going to make an investment in, but at least you know what his portfolio is. Or something, and from there itself you can get an idea in terms of the kind of direction that the VCs.
When can we take a decision whether to develop a technology and transfer the technology or go for expanding it?
That would be literally the topic of another discussion, but let me try to give you a short answer to this. I have seen companies that are focused on just developing technology primarily because the way in which they have structured themselves is they say that, look, I can build this technology. Within me, I don't have the capability to scale this up. So let me take it and give it to someone who's potentially a distributor, and I will work out an agreement with them in terms of whether it's royalty, whether it's a one-time fee for transfer, whatever is the kind of method that they can. There are plenty of people who do that particular route, right? So there are people who do that. They'll come up to the level of saying that, look, I'll patent this, and then after that, I'll give it to you. You take it and do what you want. So I came across somebody who was doing this just 2 or 3 days back at Field. I remember the name. Something in the energy space they had done, and unfortunately they've gone ahead and built some particular intelligence IP around that. They've gone ahead and licensed it out to somebody for 2 years. I don't know what sense it makes. They've licensed it out perfectly. Right? So that's something. On the other hand, sometimes what happens is if you build out a product, and if you see that within your initial, the initial startup team is always very, very small, 4 or 5 people at the most, right? So when you're starting with that, you're beginning to see that, look, even within our own team, 4 or 5 of us or 6 of us, something like that, we are able to figure out, the customers are approaching us, customers want to buy from us. Then that might be an approach that you turn around and say, look, rather than licensing it out, let me go ahead and, build this thing myself. So that's the way in which it works.
Same. Going back to the previous same question that I asked. What are the green flags and red flags while doing the due diligence for VCs?
There's this 18-page list which I'll share with you. That is what are the things that VCs look for. And I'm not joking. It is 18 pages long. Single.
What was the best pitch you had, sir?
Sorry?
What was the best pitch you heard?
I'm not going to comment. I've heard so many of them. I'm not going to say I like this one the best. I'm not going to say that. But I'll tell you, more often than not, the ones that I really like are the ones where the guy comes across as unassuming. Okay, the startup founder comes across as unassuming, not the flamboyant type. The guy comes across as unassuming, he makes a presentation, he or she is extremely passionate about what they are talking about. And they are pitching to you not to raise money, but more to say that, look, give me help. Support me in some way or the other. What are the ways in which you can do this? Those are the kind of things that I really see which are good. In fact, one of the better pitches that I've seen was, all of you have heard of Nestaway? Nestaway is a company. They initially made this initial pitch. Amar came to me and said that, look, we want to try and do this, tell me what you think. And he made this presentation, so not even a presentation, it was literally sketching it out on a piece of paper on a tabletop. Saying, boss, my sister came over here, she's not able to find place, so therefore I'm trying to do this. He jumped out of my chair. I said, boss, who's going to say no to this? So I took him across to IDG Ventures. IDG invested in there in the beginning. 5 million, they put in the first 5 crores. 5 crores for a paper plan. Not even, something which had been done on a deck. This is literally one single sheet of paper on which he did this in front of that investor saying, boss, this is the dhanda. And this is the result that I've seen so far. Quietly went there. These guys had exited one company before, Amar and C2. They had exited a company before, so investors knew them to a certain extent. So they said that these people have the experience of running a company. So all those came into the picture and they.
Can you please, for the sake of the audience, once again repeat the previous experience and some results that we showed? Because the first sentence that you mentioned, just the idea on a piece of paper made people give money, is the biggest problem that we tackle when we are talking to students who say, I have an idea, I don't want others to copy it, but give me money and I'll build it.
Okay. So the only reason why someone like an Amar or Jitendra Sahu could get away with this was they had built a company earlier called Briz TV Labs, that they had sold, that they had raised money for. some, I forget the name, much smaller fund. They had raised a small amount of money. They sold the company to Airtel. So they were well known. Okay, so they had that prior experience of having exited a company. Okay. Second, the idea itself was something which was a no-brainer. I mean, where people could look at it and they could prove it, right? So the way in which they did it was very simple, right? What they did was, their hypothesis was very simple, which is that bachelors find it very difficult to get a place. Why? Because landlords will turn around and say, I ran through it. Okay, I'm not joking. This is like, I moved to Visakhapatnam recently. Okay, this is my own story. Okay, I moved to Visakhapatnam recently and I was looking around for a place. So finally, I found a place in Komadi. Right. So Komadi, there's this place called Maurya Meadows. So this owner actually sits in Qatar. Okay, in Doha. So someone from there, they said that look, write to this guy, message him, and he will listen. So the usual WhatsApp messages first. So I messaged him on WhatsApp, and he said, "You here with family?" So I said, "No, my family is in Bangalore. My children are in Bangalore. They're studying over there. Occasionally they'll come." So he said, "We want to give to a family." I said, "First, let's get on into a Zoom call first." Okay, I said, "Do you see this?" So it doesn't matter. Okay. Immediately after that, he said, it's okay. But I'm lucky that I had grey hair. If I had black hair, I'm not joking, maybe I wouldn't have got that place.
But after 2 pegs, it turns black.
Yeah. That's a different story. That he doesn't need to know. Okay, so, but this is the problem that, individuals face in a place like Bangalore, right? So what this guy did was, and Amar, he did a brilliant thing. What he did was, he went to his own home. He cleaned out his own home. He hid away everything that needed to be hidden, and he put that out as saying that, look, here is a 3-bedroom place that is available for bachelors. I want 3 bachelors to come and live over here. Okay? And this has a washing machine, this has a fridge, this has some cooking thing. There are 3 beds, there are some 3 tables, whatever. And he had taken photos and he put it out on Facebook. Okay? Guess how many responses he got back? Thousands. All that he had. And people were lining up and saying, "Boss, where can I give the money?" It wasn't even saying that, look, I want to come and see the place. Look, I want the place, give me, where do I give the money? Please send bank details, sir. So if he had done that, he could have raised money for his company that way, sir. But he took that Facebook response to IDG Ventures. And he said, this is what's happening. He didn't need any other question. So for students who are going to, make something like this, have something like this in place. That says, look, I have so many people who are lining up to give me money. The investor will still, do some level of diligence on you, but it will be less. Any more? Yeah.
Basically, can you talk about some dark side of VC funding? Like how often, it can be thought itself as a measure of success of a startup rather than, startup founders focusing on what they want to achieve. So many times I'm seeing, people focus on can we get VC funding than actually needing it to, foster their business and all.
Like to add to the brand value of the startup. Like.
Yeah, more, especially in India, like in tier 2, tier 6, I see. The aim is just to impress VC and get some money. How will they actually use the money? That's a different story.
That doesn't happen these days.
Okay.
It doesn't happen these days because I think investors also become quite, worry about this kind of thing. Unless it's an extremely naive investor. And I don't think the word naive and investor goes together. If someone is naive, then he won't have money. He or she won't have the money to be able to invest. Let's put it that way, right? But I have come across situations where startups have done this. Okay, where they have raised the money. I've come across this particular situation where I'm not going to talk about the name of the company once again. This is a company that had been incubated both by IIM Ahmedabad and by IIM Bangalore. Okay, they raised money from an investor, and guess what they did with that money? They went ahead and bought themselves flats. Okay, they raised 4 crores, they spent 2 crores on buying flats. That's it. And the investor is running around and saying, "Kya hai paise ka? That's it." So both these startup founders were sent to jail for some amount of time for conning an investor. So these things can happen. So that's something. But by and large, see, if there are founders who think that, look, I can call a guy and take money out from that guy. Here's the thing, right? It's better to be a leper outside a temple than to be a startup founder. If you're a leper outside a temple, at least someone will give you money in pity. Startup founder, nobody pities. Okay, so keep that in mind. I'm serious about this. Yeah.
I was late for a few slides, so sorry if I'm asking.
Not a problem.
I have a small startup which includes some farmer support kind of social enterprises. While I'm trying to pitch, I have two versions that I'm hearing. One is VCs never care about what's the social enterprise. They're always busy in like how much profit I will get. And there's a second side I'm hearing from some people like they might be more interested if it has a social touch to it. So
No, your first impression is correct. The second impression will work when you're talking about CSR. Corporate social responsibility, that's never from VCs. That's always from large companies. CSR money can be, you know what CSR is, right? So CSR money is typically something that's given by large companies out of a share of their profits that they make, and they put that money into ventures such as these. But they're also equally careful in terms of seeing the kind of results that you are declaring based on the investment that they are giving or the grants that they are giving. That's the. But if you're going to a regular SEBI registered venture fund, no way in which they'll be looking at. Sure, it has a social impact, but at the same time, it is going to bring them money back. That will make Shylock, the guy from Shakespeare, right? Shylock looks like a kindergarten kid or something like that. They'll love you for as much money as you can return back to them. That's the main thing that they are looking at. The rest are all advantages.
Just mentioned in corporation document about 10 years, this is the written thesis expert. Digital. That is it like a virtual value also, or is it a real value?
Real return that they are exiting. So at the end of 5 years, see, when let's assume that you made an investment in, say for example, a mutual fund or something like that, right? Let's assume that the fund period is 5 years. At the end of 5 years, you expect that money to come back to you, right, into your account. That's the same way investors expect. So that's another technique that some of the investors have, GPs have figured out how to do it. They will know that at this point in time, this company 8, 9, and 10 that I've invested in, I do not want to exit at this stage because otherwise it's going to create a problem down the line because I'm never going to have this kind of, this company is scaling and I do not want to exit at this point in time. So around that, the period of the 5th, 6th, 7th year, they'll start creating a new fund. And that new fund will buy out the old fund stock in this company. So that way they will return the money back to the initial investors and say, yeah, you wanted your 310, I've given you your 310 back. But they still stay invested in the potential rock stars. Okay?
Is there any tips or tricks for the value creation?
That's an entire MBA course. But I can't. Too big a question to answer. Yeah. Thank you so much. Round of applause. Everybody has become very comfortable listening to him and gaining a lot of insights. Thank you so much. But we were very fortunate to have you here, and it was another thing happened to be that today we did not have startup pitches, so therefore, a 25 to 30 minute thing, we were able to actually listen to you for a whole hour.
I lost track of time. I'm so sorry.
No. We are happy. He actually wanted me to go on. And they're willing to sit and listen, so we could have gone on a little bit more. I'm just telling you that we have one small thing that I'd like to do as a part of our regular meeting. Thank you so much once again. As all of you are